potential pain sources for the shoulder. Where are you going to find pain? Because everybody always wants to tell you, oh, my pain's right here, so my problem must be right here. Okay? Or my problem is here because this is where my pain is. You get a lot of referred pain around the shoulder. So where your pain actually is doesn't necessarily mean anything about where the actual source of it is. The neck, for instance, will refer pain very frequently to the traps. It will refer pain to your rhomboids or your scapular retractors, and it will refer pain to the lateral arm. Okay? Your rotator cuff, which can really be kind of confused and you got to tease through it a little bit if you know what you're doing, the rotator cuff and the capsule will both refer pain to the lateral shoulder as well. Okay? But the shoulder will almost never refer pain below the elbow. So if you hear people talking about numbness, tingling, pain going down their arm, that typically is coming from their neck and they need to address it. It doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want with the shoulder, but it means the shoulder is probably not the principal issue there. Now you let it go long enough and you'll create a shoulder problem from a neck problem, which is one of the things that I see really often in the clinic in 40, 50, 60-year-old people. They all come in with shoulder pain, and probably 75% of them have involvement of the cervical spine, neck, and thoracic spine. Most bicep pain that you get is also going to be referred from the shoulder in some fashion or referred from the neck. You will not see a ton of just straightforward bicep tendonitis. It just doesn't happen that often. Usually there is an underlying reason why people are having bicep symptoms, and usually that is because of poor motion in the thoracic or cervical spine or the neck or the back and rounded forward shoulders. So make sure we're looking at people's flexibility in their anterior chest here to make sure that they can do all the movements that you want them to do. Because when we're talking 40, 50, 60-year-old people, I don't have people come in and see me with shoulder injuries because they're weak, predominantly. They come in and see me because they have a major lack of flexibility in the shoulder and in the spine. So be thinking about flexibility with your baby boomer types, and we may need to tailor our programs a little bit more, things we'll be talking about, towards flexibility and less towards just pure strength and power, which we're doing anyway, but it's something to be thinking about because you know now what are some potential sources of pain. So, assessments that you could be doing with your clients. The first one you need to be looking at is posture. When they're lifting, what posture are they in? They need to be in a good posture, not this rounded posture. As you're sitting there talking to them, or when you go out into the waiting room to get them, are they sitting here like this? That should be a key to you, to be thinking, let me protect this person's shoulder. They have really poor posture. Or let's start working on postural muscles. Let's start working on sustaining postures while they're doing certain activities. If they're doing some sort of shoulder lifting activities, you don't want them doing it with rounded shoulders. They need to be sitting up nice and tall, which is standard, but sometimes I think we forget that stuff. You can assess shoulder motion. You can assess shoulder motion just basically by looking at the exercises that they do. Are they limited somewhere? When you're stretching them, we need to be doing quick screens. What's their shoulder motion look like? Can they move like everybody else? Or they're like, oh, that hurts. And you check the other one. Does the other one hurt? No. Well, we just found a problem that they didn't really know that they had. They just chalked it up to, I've got some arthritis, or I've got a little ache or pain in that shoulder. That little ache or pain in that shoulder when you're doing overhead press can turn into a real big problem real fast. And now you've injured their shoulder. They go to the doctor, they have an MRI, and the doctor says, oh, you have a rotator cuff tear. And now what do they associate that rotator cuff tear with? The HIT Center. It's now the HIT Center's rotator cuff tear, right? When the reality is that cuff tear was there before, you've just flared it up for whatever reason. And it should be able to be calmed down, but now the association is the HIT Center hurt me, right? Which that is something that I want to avoid. So if we're screening motion and we're paying attention to our clients, we can say, let's look at this, or why don't you have a physical therapist look at you? He's right up front. Any of us can do it. Me, Kelly, Alicia, Mark, or my mom would be happy to look at anybody. Because if it's going to prevent someone from being injured or it's going to help you guys as trainers, we want to help you guys. Instability we've already touched on. These are going to be your overhead athletes. You rarely see instability in anybody that's above the age of 30. And if they do have some instability, they're typically not doing any sort of activity that is going to flare it up. Think about this in your baseball players.
How can we objectively assess that? Like, usually, like, I'll have somebody say, like, it just feels loose. You know, it's kind of like something. But is there any kind of motion that we can look? Is there any kind of like they may not tell us? Is there anything we can tell, like, by what they're doing? I mean,
There are some really easy ways to assess hypermobility in people. And what you do is you take their thumb, see how far it'll bend back. If their toenail will touch their forearm, they're hypermobile and you know it. Okay? Another thing that you can do is check their elbows. How far do their elbows, because you guys have all seen these teenage girls that they have hyperextension of their elbows 10 or 15 degrees. That person's hypermobile. If you lay them down on the table and you externally rotate them and they go 15 or 20 degrees past 90, you know they're hypermobile. If they have a lot of recurvatum or hyperextension of their knees. These are things that somebody walks in the door. I mean, when these high school kids are, come in with shoulder pain during baseball season, I can pretty much diagnose them by what they look like walking down the hallway. Especially teenage girls. They're really easy to pick out typically. And frankly, that's typically the source of their shoulder pain is instability in high schoolers. It is rarely that they're too tight. Some of your baseball players that do a lot of throwing, they will be too tight and they need flexibility work. Or they need scapular strengthening because they do not have a good, stable platform for the arm to be on. That answer your question? And then the scapula, which I've mentioned. You'll see, anybody ever seen scapular winging? Basically, the scapula looks like it's coming out this way. It looks like they've got wings. If you want, you can go to YouTube videos. There are people that really scapular wing, and they can actually crush a pop can in between their scapula. It's pretty intense. But this is a real indicator of someone that potentially is set up for shoulder pain. And if they are a big scapular winger, there are some really easy scapular exercises that I can show you guys to help with scapular retraction and scapular stability. And usually in these young people, it's not so much weakness as it is neuromuscular. So when we facilitate this musculature over a couple week period of time, their pain goes away. And you guys know, I didn't strengthen them in 2 weeks. What I did was I gave them exercises to facilitate the musculature to do what it's designed to do. It's there, it just hasn't been used and kind of been facilitated properly. Exercises to be cautious with, especially guys in your 40, 50, 60-year-old people. When I see rotator cuff tears, this is the population I see it in. We talked about how rare rotator cuff tears are in young people. You just don't see them very often unless they've had a trauma. You see rotator cuff tears in 40, 50, 60-year-old people with rounded shoulders. Rotator cuff tears happen a lot more in people that are sedentary, believe it or not, sedentary jobs. Because sedentary people in sedentary jobs have poor quality tissue. They have a lot of fatty type muscle and tendon, which is more susceptible for injury. So be careful with these people when you're having them do shoulder press and bench press. And if they mention pain, you vary the exercise, change the exercise. There are any number of us that can show you if you're not comfortable with changing an exercise to make it so that it's pain-free. And then when that person says, yeah, I had some pain with that, if they mention that more than once, or even just once, I want to know about it, okay? And I don't care, nothing is too small.